Ready to do this, Butler? Right here, on the street. It's as good a place as any. This ain't legal. Ryerson smiled. My contact says I won't have a problem with that. Are you going to take a hand here, Thompson? 'Cause I gotta say, that would change my order. I'm not foolish enough to take on the two of you at the same time. So you'll just move on to the next name on the list? Thompson asked. That's the plan. Then I'm in, Thompson said. So you'll just have to move on. Have it your way. No, Butler said. Wait. I can't do that. He looked at Thompson. I can't just send him on to the next man. It's not right. What the hell's right got to do with it when you're dealing with a bounty hunter? I'm sorry, Butler said. I just can't do it. He looked at Ryerson. Let's do this. Just you and me. You this good, Ryerson? Thompson asked. You always do this face to face? I'm not a back shooter, if that's what you mean. That makes you a man among bounty hunters, I guess, Thompson said. I'll just wait over here until you're finished, Butler. I'll buy you a drink to celebrate. Same offer apply to me, Thompson? Ryerson asked. Thompson ignored him and moved away from the two men. Come on, Butler, Ryerson said. Let's do this before the street gets too busy. One of us might get trampled. I still got some questions, Ryerson. I told you I don't know who put up the... Not that, Butler said. The other two. Oh, them, Ryerson said. I thought I recognized one of them last night, but it didn't come to me until morning. Corbin? Ryerson nodded. He's wanted in Missouri, he said. Small price, but I'll take it. He's third on my list. And who's the other one? Ah, Ryerson said. Bagging this man would add to my rep, if I cared about that. He's supposed to be dead already, so seeing him here was a surprise. Hank, Butler thought. It had to be Hank. But I think I'll keep that to myself, Ryerson said. Just on the off chance you kill me, you might decide to go after the bounty. You couldn't be more wrong. We'll see. Ryerson set his rifle down against a post and stepped into the street. Let's do this, he said. I've got a long day. What's going on? Thompson turned to see who had asked the question, saw the badge before he saw the man. Marshal? Fred Singer looked over at Butler and Ryerson. Who's that talking to Butler? It doesn't look friendly. It ain't, the gambler said. In the next few minutes, one of them is going to kill the other. What? Singer asked. Not in my town. Singer took one step and Thompson said, I wouldn't. Why not? It's between the two of them. Singer looked at him. Are you telling me not to interfere? Marshal, Thompson said, I'm just giving you a friendly warning. Whose play are you backing, Thompson? Must be Butler's. You think he's going to come out of this alive? Looks like gambler versus gunman to me. You better let me stop it. This is what they both want, Marshal, Thompson said. I think you and me just better butt out. Singer eyed Thompson warily. He knew the man was both gambler and gunman. If I try to stop them, he asked, will you stop me? Let's not find out. Ryerson backed into the street, his hand down by his gun. Butler stepped down, brushed his jacket back over his holster. Oddly, he thought it was refreshing to find someone who was coming right at him and not trying to bushwhack him. Ryerson seemed very confident. not a trait Butler liked in a man he was facing with a gun. Butler did what he did when he was trying to read a man's face to determine what he was holding. He trained his eyes on Ryerson, concentrated, and waited for him to make a move. Ryerson was thinking about one of his other targets as he faced Butler. He wasn't sure he'd be able to take him the way he was taking this gambler. Corbin, the other gambler, would probably be easier than this, but he'd have to come up with a plan for the third man. Nobody on the street realized what was happening until the two men drew and fired. Chapter 50. Ben Thompson handed Butler a cold beer. "Congratulations," he said. "That's quite a move you have." "I don't think I should be congratulated for killing a man." "Look at it this way," Thompson said. "You saved the other two men he was after. Did you get their names?" Butler hesitated just a moment, then said, "No, he wouldn't tell me." "Doesn't matter, I guess," Thompson said. "What did you say to the marshal?" Butler asked. "I thought I was on my way to jail for sure." "I reasoned with him," Thompson said. "Made him realize it was something personal between you and Ryerson, and none of his business." "Well, whatever you said, I appreciate it," Butler said. "At least I didn't have to deal with the law over this." "He's probably back at his office looking through his wanted posters," Thompson warned. "That's okay," Butler assured him. "He won't find anything." "Ryerson seemed to think he was covered," Thompson said. "Might pay for you to leave town, Butler." "I don't think so." Butler looked down into his beer. "Was one of the other men Corbin?" Butler looked at Thompson. "How did you know that?" "He skipped town," Thompson said. "I saw him leaving in a hurry. If he had just waited a little longer—" "Probably doesn't matter," Butler said. "Somebody else will recognize him at some point." "How often have you had to go through this?" "Plenty of times," Butler said. "At least this one had the decency to come right at me." "Yeah," Thompson said. "One of the decent bounty hunters." They were in the Lady Gay, being served by a bartender other than Updegraff. At that moment, Neil Brown came through the Batwing doors and spotted them. "I heard what happened," he said, joining them at the bar. "What was that about?" Thompson looked at Butler, obviously wondering what his explanation was going to be. "I have some things to take care of," he said. "I'll see you later, Butler. Brown?" "Thompson?" The two men nodded to each other, and Ben Thompson left. "I guess I never asked," Butler said, "about you and Jim and Ben Thompson." "We know each other," Brown said. "Not friends. Bat never liked Ben's brother, Billy. It's complicated." "Isn't everything in this town?" Brown looked at the bartender and signaled for him to bring a beer. "You don't have to tell me what this morning was about," he said to Butler. "Not if it's none of my business." "It was personal." "I know Ryerson was a bounty hunter," Brown said. "I don't hold it against you if there's paper out on you." "There isn't," Butler said. "Not in the legal sense, anyway. There's a price on my head. It's been there a long time. But it's got nothing to do with the law." "Wow," Brown said. "That is personal, isn't it? You got somebody mad enough at you to put a price on your head? And rich enough to make it a high one. So the other morning might have been about that. It may not have been. Today was definitely about that." "Did he tell you who it was?" Brown asked. "I mean, who put up the money?" "He said he didn't know." "Do you believe him?" "Yes, I've heard that from others." Others, Brown said. How many others had there been? Many, Butler said. Dozens. I've lost count. How long has this been going on? Years. Jesus, Brown said. That's like being on the run, and not knowing who you're on the run from. At least wanted men know they're wanted by the law. That can't be an easy way to live. It isn't, Butler said, but I don't have much of a choice. Is Butler your real name? Yes. Brown held up his hand. Okay, I don't need that explanation, he said. I'm sure you're keeping your name for a good reason. Butler was about to say so when Jim Masterson came down the stairs. He looked around at the 3 or 4 customers the Lady Gay had at that moment, then joined Butler and Neil Brown at the bar. I heard shots while I was getting dressed, he said to them. Anyone know what was going on? Why don't you get a beer from your bartender, Butler said, and I'll tell you a story. Chapter 51. Jim Masterson listened to Butler's story, the same one he'd told Neil Brown, with no deviation. Masterson listened while quietly sipping his beer, and when Butler was finished, he said, We sure are drinking a lot of beer for breakfast since you came to town. Really? Butler asked. I thought since you owned a saloon that would be kind of common. No, Masterson said. I'm more used to eggs. He put his beer down, only half finished. Probably time for you to leave town. Why is everybody telling me that? Butler wondered. You've got enough problems of your own without getting involved in ours, Masterson said. I can make my own decisions, Jim, Butler said. Besides, there's still some money to be made here. The way I hear it, you're doing all right, Brown said. I could do better. Masterson scratched his jaw. You had Thompson out there backing your play? He asked. All he did was keep it fair. But he'll watch your back? Brown asked. Surprisingly, yeah. Well, Masterson said, you couldn't have anyone better. According to Bat, Ben's the best man he ever saw with a gun. Bat Masterson said that? Butler asked. Yes, he did, Masterson said. I don't know that I agree, but he's still a good man to have on your side. We agree on that, Butler said. Ben says he thinks this town is about to erupt. He's a pretty damn good judge of the situation, if you ask me, Neil Brown said. I think Peacock and Updegraff are going to try to kill Jim outright, any day now. I don't think they have the gumption for that, Masterson said. I think you're wrong, Jim, Brown said. But I guess we'll have to wait and see who's right. I got some work to do in the back, Masterson said. I'll see you gents later. As Masterson went into his office, Brown said, I'll have to stick around him, I think. I think you're right, Butler said. Neil, what do you think about sending for Bat? I'd be for it, Brown said right away. But I'd never do it. Why not? Well, even if it kept Jim alive, our friendship would probably be over. He'd be mad as hell at anyone who did that. I see. Thinking about it? Brown asked. No, Butler said after a second. I can honestly say I'm not thinking about doing it at all. Butler left Brown at the Lady Gay and walked over to Hank's cafe. He found the man in the kitchen, cooking. Thought you ought to know, he told him. Ryerson's dead. Who killed him? I did. He came after me first. First? Said he had a list, Butler said. I was first, Corbin was on it, and there was a third man. Hank took a deep breath. He didn't say who the third man was? No. You think it was me? No way for me to know that. Who's Corbin? Just a gambler. Made a mistake a while back. Got a small price put on his head. Ryerson had a memory for that sort of thing. If that was true, then he probably remembered me eventually, Hank said. He'd have to have a hell of a memory, though. It's been a while. Doesn't matter now, Butler said. He's dead. Better for everyone, I guess, Hank said. You hungry? Butler shook his head. I had breakfast, he said. Might come back for lunch, though. That'd be okay, Hank said. Thanks for bringing me the word. Sure. After Butler left, Hank tossed a look over at the trunk where his gun was. The leather of the holster was getting old, even though he oiled it. The gun was in good working order. But after all these years, was he? Maybe he wouldn't have to find out. When Butler got back to Front Street, he ran into M.J. Healy, who was hurrying along, and stopped short when she saw him. Well, thank you very much, she said, although her demeanor was not a very angry one. What did I do? It's what you didn't do, she said. I had to hear it from someone else that you were involved in a shooting this morning. Butler shrugged. I didn't think it was big news. That you shot and killed a bounty hunter on the street? In a fair fight. Okay, she said. But who was he? What was he doing in town? And how did it come to be you who shot him? All very good questions. And will you answer any of them? He thought a moment. I don't want my name in the paper again, he said finally. Did you read the interview? He hadn't. The paper was still in his room, unopened. The man's name was Kevin Ryerson, he said. He was a bounty hunter. I don't know who he was here for, but he forced me into a confrontation for some reason. And you're not wanted by the law? I'm not. No wanted posters out on you. No, Butler said. You can ask the marshal. I understand he was checking on that. Maybe I will, she said. Don't be so mad, he told her. There was nothing that happened this morning that's going to get you to San Francisco any faster. So are you a gunman now? She asked. I thought you were just a gambler. Are you another Ben Thompson? Definitely not another Thompson, Butler said. I'm not a gunman. The bounty hunter just wasn't as fast with a gun as he thought he was. Well, she said, that was good for you. Yes, it was. Why didn't the marshal step in and stop it, or the sheriff? I can't answer those questions, he said. I don't even know who your new sheriff is. She was breathing as fast or looking as agitated as she had been, and she'd never really been angry, just frustrated. Look, he said, I promise you, if I kill anybody else, you'll be the first to know. That's not funny, she said, then added, but all right. They stood there facing each other for a few seconds, and then he said, well, yes, she said, I have to get back to work. You're, not leaving town because of this, are you? No, he said, not leaving town. Well, good. Maybe we can talk later. He smiled at the fact that she had suddenly become very shy. I'll come over and see you. That would be nice. She turned and walked away. He watched her for a block, then went his own way. Chapter 52. When are we going to make our next move? UpToGraph asked A.J. Peacock. As soon as the men I sent for get here. Men? How many are we talking about? As many as we need to do the job. How much is that going to cost? What do you care, Al? Peacock asked. You're not paying anybody anything. In fact, you've made money off all this. What? How? Oh, come on, Peacock said, shaking his head. Don't make me tell you, Al. Are you calling me a thief, Anthony? What if I am? The two men faced each other over Peacock's desk, his face turning red, and UpToGraph's jaw thrust out pugnaciously. Look, Peacock said, step back and take a deep breath. All we have to do is wait for Ruger and his men. You sent for Ruger? UpToGraph asked. That's going to cost. Oh, never mind. Right. Never mind, Peacock said. Whatever it costs is going to be worth it when I'm sole owner of the Lady Gay. Sole owner? UpToGraph asked. You mean I ain't going to be your partner? I've had it with partners, Peacock said. What I'll do is cut you in for a small price. Let's start with 10%, minus whatever you've stolen in beer, whiskey, and cash. That ain't fair. Stop stealing from me, and maybe it'll get fair, Al, Peacock said. Just do your job for a while until Ruger gets here, and then we'll see what happens. Got it? Yeah, I got it. Then go to work. UpToGraph headed for the door, but Peacock stopped him by calling his name. What? Keep your gun clean, Peacock said. What for? I hired Ruger, that's true, Peacock explained. But we're going to get our hands dirty, too. That's fine with me, UpToGraph said. As long as I get to pump some lead into Masterson. Oh, yeah? And what'll you do when his brother finds out? I ain't afraid of Bat Masterson. I'll remind you that you said that, Al, when the time comes. UpToGraph left the office, slamming the door behind him. Peacock sat back in his chair, laced his fingers behind his head. If Al UpToGraph thought he was going to take on another partner after he rid himself of Jim Masterson, he was in for a big surprise. Once Jason Ruger got to town, Jim Masterson's days were numbered, because Ruger didn't let anything get in his way when he was doing a job he was getting paid for. Not even the law. Butler was not happy about having to kill Ryerson. His only consolation was that it had not been a circus. Word was spreading, but they hadn't had a big crowd watching them. He always felt relieved when he killed a man who was trying to kill him, but he never felt satisfied. Killing a man was not something he enjoyed, even though he had been forced into getting good at it. He stopped at the general store and picked up 3 more 3-for-a-nickel cheroots. He was going to sit in front of the hotel again, relax, keep his back to the wall, and wait for the poker games to get started in the saloon. Tonight he might try the Alhambra. It would be nice to play without having Ryerson looking over his shoulder. He settled back into his chair, the armchair Ben Thompson had brought out from the lobby. Marshal Fred Singer entered Mayor A.B. Webster's office, and neither man was very happy. That gambler killed a man on the street, Marshal, Webster said. He should either be in your jail or run out of town. In order to do that, Singer said, I would have had to go up against Ben Thompson. How would you like to try that, Mayor? It's not my job to do it, Marshal, Webster argued. It's yours. That's what you get paid for. You want my badge? Singer asked. Is that what you want? Webster sat back in his chair and said, Fred, close the door, sit down, and calm down. Singer did as he was asked, but he was still fuming. I got word that Peacock has sent for some assistance, Webster told him. What kind of assistance? The kind that will help him get done what he wants to get done. You mean help getting rid of Jim Masterson? I mean help, Webster said. I don't really know what Peacock's intentions are. Only he knows that. What are you telling me? That I think you did the right thing today, Webster said. Upon reflection, I mean. What? Now that I've thought about it, Webster explained, there was nothing else you could have done. Singer looked surprised. Thank you, Mayor. And when Peacock makes his move, Webster went on, I think you should do the same thing you did today. Stay out of it. Singer fidgeted in his chair. You're telling me that Peacock has sent for some gunman to handle Jim Masterson for him, and probably Neil Brown. And when they get here, you want me to do nothing? I think it would be in your best interest, and the town's, Webster said. That's all I'm saying. It took Singer a moment to realize that Webster was done talking, and he had been dismissed. On the boardwalk in front of City Hall, Singer fingered the badge of his chest, the badge that had belonged to Jim Masterson. He had nothing against Masterson. At one time, he might even have described them as friends. But he knew once he accepted the job as marshal, he and Jim Masterson were on different sides. What he had to decide now was just how different the sides truly were. Chapter 53. April 16th, 1881. Butler decided to stay in Dodge City for the next week for several reasons. His luck was running so good, and he was building up quite a stake for himself. When your luck is going that good, you don't want to break it yourself. You have to wait for it to break on its own. Secondly, he wanted to see the results of the telegram he'd sent. He'd figured it would take about a week, so he waited it out. Ben Thompson, however, had moved on several days before. It's quiet, he said to Butler. Too quiet. And your damn luck is going too good. Time for me to move on. I know I said I'd watch your back, but that was while I was here. You don't need to explain anything to me, Ben, Butler had told him. You've got to do what's right for you. I know you don't want to break your string of luck, Butler, but if I was you, I'd leave too. This quiet ain't gonna last forever. This is what they call a pregnant quiet, if you know what I mean. I know what you mean, Ben, Butler had said. I'll keep it in mind. Catch up with you somewhere down the line, then. The two men shook hands. Butler took to sitting in front of the hotel every day now. His mouth started to taste like crap from the cheroots, so he stopped smoking them. Instead, he started whittling. He found the same boy who had brought him the first cigars and sent him to buy a block of wood. You know what you're doing there? Neil Brown had asked him the first day he brought out the wood and knife. Yep, Butler said. I'm marking time. But can you whittle? Brown asked. Do you know what you're doing? Oh, Butler said. Hell no, I don't. So for one full morning, Neil Brown tried to give Butler a course in whittling. It didn't help much, and the more time that went by, the smaller the piece of wood got, and it resembled nothing. At the end of the afternoon, before he quit his position to go and play cards, Butler would clean up all the wood shavings that had fallen at his feet. He was, indeed, simply marking time. HÄRRY was getting impatient, but Peacock was not. "I finally got it figured," HÄRRY said to his brother-in-law on the morning of the 16th. "Got what figured?" "You know when they're getting here, don't you? That's why you're not impatient." Peacock smiled at HÄRRY. "By God, Al, you may not be as dumb as you make out to be. So you do know." Peacock produced a telegram from his desk drawer. "Got this yesterday. They'll be on the Santa Fe today." "Jesus Christ," HÄRRY said. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I told you now," Peacock said. "You and me, we're going to meet that train, Al, and it's all going to end today." "Well, thank God," HÄRRY said. "The tension's been killing me." Peacock laughed. "Imagine what it's been doing to Masterson," he said, "and his friends, Brown, and that gambler, too." "That gambler bothers me," HÄRRY said. "He guns that bounty hunter and then stays in town. For what?" "Well, the way I hear it, he's cleaning out every poker player in town. And maybe one of them should get rid of him for us." "That could still happen," Peacock said. "But stay ready, Al. I'll let you know when we're going to head for the depot." "I'll be ready," HÄRRY said. "I've been ready for this for a long time. I'm going to put a bullet right in Jim Masterson's back." It had not been a good week for Marshal Fred Singer. He was still struggling with what Mayor Webster had told him. He was supposed to stand by and watch Jim Masterson be killed. It didn't sit right with him, but if he did something about it, he'd be switching sides again. For at one time he'd been perceived as a Masterson supporter, until he'd accepted the badge they'd taken away from Jim. Now, if he switched back, he'd be branding himself as a man who couldn't make up his mind which side he was on. In truth, he was on Fred Singer's side. He just didn't know, lately, where that put him. He got up from his desk and walked to the door. Looking out the window, he could see the Lady Gay off to his left, and the Dodge House off to his right, where Butler sat each day, whittling. The man looked completely relaxed. Maybe that was what Singer needed to do. Sit out in front of his office with a block of wood and relax. Let whatever was going to happen, happen. He was sure that would not have been Jim Masterson's solution, if he was still wearing the marshal's badge. "Why don't you go and take a walk?" Jim Masterson said to Neil Brown. "You're making me nervous." Brown looked across the table at Masterson. They were each nursing a beer. HÄRRY was behind the bar, and A.J. Peacock was in the office. "I got nowhere to go," Brown said. "I think I'll just stay here and keep you alive." "It's been a quiet week, Neil." "Too quiet." Brown leaned forward. "Besides, I happen to know there's a sawed-off behind the bar." "HÄRRY wouldn't have the balls," Masterson said. "I'm just waiting for Peacock to leave the office so I can go in." "What are you doing there, Jim?" Brown asked. "You're not the office type. Even when you were marshal, you were never in the office. You were always on the street." "It's my office, too," Masterson said. "It's not just his." "Listen to you," Brown said. You're fighting over something you don't even want. This ain't about a desk, Neil. Neil Brown spread his arms to indicate the interior of the Lady Gay and said, I wasn't talking about the desk. Peacock came out of the office, saw that the place had a smattering of patrons, among them Jim Masterson and Neil Brown, sitting with their heads together. He walked over to the bar, waited for Updegraff to finish serving a cowboy, then called him over. Go on over to the railroad station and wait for me, he said. Take your gun. You bet I will. Peacock put his hand on Updegraff's arm. Slowly, he said, and go out the back. Okay. Updegraff started away, then stopped short. But what about the bar? Lenny's coming in to man the bar, Peacock said. Go. Updegraff nodded, came out from behind the bar, and went through a doorway that led to his room near the back. He'd collect his guns and go out the back door. Peacock got behind the bar to wait for Lenny, one of the other bartenders. Within the hour, he'd be going over to the station to await the arrival of Jason Ruger and his men. He considered drawing 2 beers and taking them over to Masterson and Brown to celebrate their last day on Earth. Neil Brown saw Peacock get behind the bar and said, What the hell is that about? I don't know, Masterson said, but it looks like I can get to the office now. He stood up without looking over at Peacock and turned to head for the office. Jim, Masterson looked down at his friend and said, Neil, damn it, take a walk. He turned and continued to the office. Neil Brown stared after him, trying not to be angry. His friend was under a lot of pressure. In the end, he decided to do what Masterson suggested and get some fresh air. For the past several days, Butler had taken to walking over to the train depot in the afternoon when the Santa Fe was due in, to wait and see who got off. The train's arrival was still a couple of hours away, but his block of wood, the third one he was working on, was almost gone, so he decided just to take the walk. He put what was left of the wood on the chair and headed for the train station at a slow pace. Chapter 54. As Butler was passing the Lady Gay, Neil Brown came out, spotted him, and waved. Butler slowed so the other man could join him. "Where are you off to?" Brown asked. "Just walking," Butler lied. "Thought I'd just walk to the train station and back. Mind if I join you?" "Something wrong?" Brown said, falling into step with Butler. "Jim and I are getting on each other's nerves." "What about?" "He thinks I need to give him more room." "Why don't you?" "Because he'll get himself shot." "It's been a pretty quiet week," Butler said. "I know," Brown said. "I don't like it." "What's been happening with you? Your luck holding?" "Actually, no," Butler said. "I've lost the last 2 nights. I lose tonight. It might be time to move on." "You'll miss the fireworks." "You really think there's going to be some?" "Oh, yeah," Brown said. "It's going to come to that. Mark my words." Butler frowned. Even with him in town, Masterson and Brown would be outnumbered. He was hoping the man he'd sent the telegram to would arrive, freeing him up to leave with a clear conscience. "Ain't nobody shot at you in a week," Neil Brown said. "That must be nice." "Refreshing," Butler said, would be a better word. Updegraff left the Lady Gay by the back door and hurried over to the train station. He was wearing his pistol and carrying a rifle. Today was the day he'd been waiting for. He didn't understand why Peacock hadn't done something like this a long time ago. When he reached the station, he mounted the platform, went to the window to talk to the clerk. "What time's the train due?" "About half an hour," the clerk said, "give or take." "Give or take what?" "An hour," the clerk said, and cackled. "Never can tell what's happening up the line." HÄRRY scowled and turned away from the man. When the bartender, Lenny, finally arrived, Peacock went straight up to his room to collect his rifle. He also removed the little pocket gun he usually carried and strapped on his holster. He hadn't used any of his guns in a while, but it wasn't something you forgot how to do. And today was a special occasion. Jim Masterson couldn't sit at his desk. For one thing, he didn't think of it as his desk. His desk was over in the marshal's office. He paced the office, feeling bad about snapping at Neil Brown. The man was his most loyal friend and didn't deserve to be talked to like that. Masterson finally decided to go back out and apologize to him. When he opened the door and stepped out of the office, he noticed that Brown was gone. He'd probably gone for that walk he'd been pushing him to take. Masterson decided to go and find his friend and make his apology. As he approached the Batwing doors, he noticed that Lenny was behind the bar, and Peacock was gone. "Lenny, where's Peacock?" "Don't know where he is, Mr. Masterson," the bartender said, "but he just left." "He didn't say where he was going?" "No," Lenny said, "but he was moving pretty fast as he came down the stairs, and he was carrying his rifle. Sure looked like he was wearing his holster, too." "Shit," Masterson said beneath his breath, and hurried outside. "I notice you've been sitting out front of your hotel all week during the day," Brown said. "Just watching the town go by?" "Pretty much." "I had an idea you might be doing something else." "Like what?" "Like maybe waiting for something, or somebody." Butler kept staring straight ahead and didn't comment. "I also notice you've been taking this walk over to the station for the past couple of days." "Have you been watching me, Neil?" "Ain't had much of anything else to do," Brown said. "So I mosey over and look out the window or the door of the Lady Gay, and there you are, walking to the station." Butler didn't comment. "So, who we waiting for, Butler?" They came within sight of the station, and Butler noticed something right away. "What's he doing there?" he asked. Brown looked ahead and saw what Butler saw. "HÄRRY," Brown said. "Son of a bitch." "Him or Peacock. Probably Peacock, 'cause Al ain't got the brains God gave a fly. Must have sent for somebody. And they're coming in on today's train." "Sent for someone," Butler said. "You mean a gunman?" "If I know Peacock," Brown said, "and he's desperate enough to do this, it'll be more than one." "Shit. Yeah." Brown grabbed Butler's arm to stop his progress, turned to face him. "Time to talk straight, Butler," Brown said. "Who'd you send for?" "I didn't send for anyone," Butler said. "I sent a telegram, but I don't know if he's coming or not. I've just been checking each day to see. Is it somebody who's going to do us some good?" "I think so." "Well," Neil Brown said, "we come this far. Tell me the rest. Who is it?" "It's Bat," Butler said. "Bat Masterson." Chapter 55. The air was dead still. In the distance, they could hear the train whistle. "This could be bad," Brown said. "Peacock's men are probably on that train. And we don't know for sure if Bat Masterson is." "We don't know if Bat's going to come at all," Brown said. "Jim is going to be, I don't know a better word for mad. Livid. Is that a word? It is. It sounds good enough. Does Bat know who sent the telegram?" "No," Butler said. "I didn't sign it." "What did it say?" "Peacock and Updegraff are planning to kill Jim. Come quick," something like that. "Well," Brown said, "my money is on him coming after a message like that." "Yeah, but maybe not on this train." "Updegraff hasn't seen us yet," Brown said. "We can go around and come at the station from the other side. If Al is here, Peacock will be along. Come on." By the time they got into position, they could see that Peacock had joined Updegraff on the platform. They were both wearing guns and carrying rifles. "They're not going to waste any time," Brown said. "As soon as the men they hired get off the train, they'll head for Jim." "All this just to get rid of Jim Masterson?" Butler said, shaking his head. "To kill him, not just get rid of him. The train would pull in any minute. If Bat is on that train, he's going to walk right into it," Brown said. "Yeah, but what are the chances he'll be on this train?" Butler asked. "That'd be some coincidence. I'm going back around to the other side, now that Peacock's here. If we have to take a hand, we might as well do it from both sides." "Okay. If something happens, don't wait for me," Brown said. "Do what you gotta do. You do the same." As Brown left to circle back around, Butler took out his gun, checked his loads, and slid it back into his holster, just as the train pulled in. "You know what this feller Ruger looks like?" Updegraff asked. "Yeah, I know him." "How many is he going to have with him?" "3, I think." The train pulled in, slowed down, eventually came to a stop. A conductor stepped down to the platform first, and then other passengers. Half a dozen people disembarked. A woman with a child, a couple of men who looked like drummers, a man and his wife. Before Peacock saw Jason Ruger step down. He was a tall, wide-shouldered man, with a flat-brimmed black hat and a black vest. 3 men stepped off right after him and looked to him for their next step. Ruger looked down the platform and saw Peacock, who waved. "Okay," Peacock said. "This is it. Let's go meet them. They'll need to get their horses from the stock car." As they started down the platform, Peacock saw a man step down several cars beyond Ruger and his men. He recognized the man and couldn't believe his eyes. "Damn," he said. "What?" Updegraff asked. "It's goddamned Bat Masterson." "Where?" Updegraff asked, looking around wildly. For a man who claimed not to be afraid of Bat Masterson, he was already sweating. Butler saw the man from the back, but instinctively knew it was Bat Masterson. He saw that Peacock had recognized him as well. Both he and Updegraff pulled their guns, and Peacock shouted to other men on the platform, "Bat Masterson!" Ruger heard the word Masterson. He didn't care if it was Jim or Bat. All he cared about was getting paid. He saw Peacock and the man with him draw their guns and turn to his men. "This is it," he said. Well trained, none of his men complained, nor did he, about how fast they were being pressed into service. They all drew their guns, and suddenly 6 men were facing a surprised Bat Masterson. Neil Brown saw what was happening, and was too far to help Bat right away. He had to get closer. He drew his gun and mounted the platform. "Watch out, Masterson!" Butler shouted, running up onto the platform, gun in hand. He didn't wait for Bat to react. He fired off a shot immediately, and one of Ruger's men caught the bullet on the hip and spun around. Bat heard the warning shout behind him, but his hand was already streaking to his gun. Somehow Peacock knew he was on the train and had a welcome set up for him. He had no time to think, just to react. He drew and fired. Jim Masterson heard the train pull in at the end of town. It didn't occur to him that Neil Brown might be there until he heard the shots. "Damn it!" he snarled and started running. Fred Singer heard the train and shots also from his office. He sat behind his desk, hands clenched into fists and eyes closed. Ruger and his men dove for cover, as did Peacock and Updegraff. But Neil Brown came up behind the two brothers-in-law and shouted, "Peacock!" Updegraff and Peacock turned, saw Brown, and raised their guns. Brown fired and caught Updegraff in the chest. The man immediately went down on his back. Peacock dropped to one knee and raised his gun to fire. Butler reached Bat and stood shoulder to shoulder with him. "Who are you?" Bat demanded. "A friend." "I ain't gonna argue with that now," Bat Masterson said. They both fired until their guns were empty, then sought cover while they reloaded. Bat got back on the train, and Butler ducked behind a bench, moving it so it afforded him some cover. "Who's that at the other end of the platform?" Bat called out. "Neil Brown." "Where's my brother? Is he alive?" "He was at the Lady Gay." "If I know Jim," Bat yelled, "he'll be here any minute, and be mad if we don't save him some action." Butler snapped the cylinder closed on his reloaded weapon and said, "Hell, he can have as much of it as he wants, for all I care." Chapter 56. Bat was wearing two guns, and reloaded both from the cover of the railroad car. From the other end of the platform, there was still gunfire. "I'm going to jump down from the other side of the train and circle around," Bat told Butler. "Go," Butler said. "I'll keep them busy from here." Bat palmed both guns, moved through to the other side of the train, and dropped down to the ground. Butler saw Ruger's men moving toward him, moving from car to car, cover to cover, and knew he'd have to move as well. He fired off 2 shots, then turned and made his way to the end of the platform again. He was going to circle the depot again, then decided to go around the train and join Bat. He fired off the rest of his shots, then made for the train, once again reloading. When Jim Masterson reached the train station, lead was flying all over. He saw Neil Brown backing up on the platform, moving toward him, returning fire, and went to join him. "What the hell's going on?" he shouted. "Peacock," Brown said. "He's trying to kill Bat, him and some gunnies he hired." "Bat's here?" Brown nodded. "Got off the train." Peacock was firing from cover, and behind him Ruger joined him. Jim Masterson saw the hat and vest and the cut of the man's figure and said, "He hired Jason Ruger." "Ruger? Is that who it is? How many men with him?" "He got off the train with 3. Then there's Peacock and Updegraff." "Updegraff? Where?" "I put him down." "Who's at the other end of the platform?" "Bat and Butler." "Butler, too. That makes it 4 to 6. Not bad." Brown and Jim backed down the steps of the platform to use them for cover. The train station was at the end of Front Street, so behind them some of the buildings were taking lead. Suddenly, Bat appeared from behind the engine, and behind him Butler. They joined Jim and Brown, "Bat," Jim said. "Jim, got yourself into some trouble, I see. I thought you were the one in trouble." "It don't matter," Brown said. "He's right," Bat agreed. He turned and looked at Butler. "Who are you?" "His name's Butler," Jim said. "He's a friend." "So he told me." The four men conversed while returning fire from up the platform. "Let's take this off the platform," Jim suggested, "and into town." "Gonna be some damage," Bat said. "Fuck 'em," Jim said. "They fired us." "Let's go then. Will they follow?" "Oh, yeah," Jim said. "Peacock wants to finish this." "Your partner?" Bat asked, confused. "Not anymore." The four men backed away, then turned and headed down Front Street. Making a stand would be easier out in the open. "They're running," Ruger said to Peacock. "Do we let them go?" "No," Peacock said. "I brought you here to do some killing. They're just taking the fight into town." "What about the local law?" "Not a problem," Peacock said. "Just earn your money." "Let's go after 'em then." He turned and waved for his men to follow. They obeyed, even the one with a bullet in his hip. Peacock let them all go first, and then moved in behind them. He didn't know if Updegraff was dead on the platform, but he wasn't worried about it at the moment. The gun battle spilled onto the street. Jim's plan at first had been to hit and run, move from cover to cover. But suddenly he was cool, not angry. "Let's just stand and take 'em," he said. "Suits me," Neil Brown said. "I've been wanting to put a bullet into your partner for months." "Butler," Jim said, "I'm with you." "Bat?" "Why the hell not?" Bat said. "I don't know what the hell is going on anyway." By the time Ruger, his men, and Peacock made their way to Front Street, Bat, Jim, Neil Brown, and Butler were fanned out in the street. Peacock, Ruger, and his men stopped in their tracks. "Come and get it," Jim Masterson said. The streets were empty. The townspeople had taken cover at the first sound of shots. There was nobody with a badge to be seen anywhere. Dodge City had suddenly become a ghost town. But if you looked closely, you'd see faces in almost every window. Scared off the streets, folks were not too frightened to want to watch the action. "That son of a bitch Singer," Neil Brown said. "Fred Singer?" Bat asked. "He's the new marshal," Jim said. "He's staying away from this, probably on orders from the new mayor." "New mayor, new marshal," Bat said. "A whole lot of things have changed, and a whole lot have stayed the same," Jim said. The two brothers were standing shoulder to shoulder, Neil Brown to Jim's right, Butler to Bat's left. "Think they'll turn and run?" Bat asked. "They're probably getting paid a lot of money for this," Jim said. "Enough so that your legend won't intimidate them." "Well, hell," Bat said. "What good is it then?" "Here they come," Butler said. Lead and gun smoke filled the air, but only one was lethal. The two groups of men advanced on each other, firing as they came. All were cool in the face of danger, but the Mastersons, Neil Brown, and Butler were more deadly accurate with their weapons. Ruger's men, supposedly experienced, fired quickly and wildly. As hot bits of lead flew around, one tore through Butler's coat, singeing his side. The gambler fired coolly, putting one of Ruger's men down. Bullets could be heard striking the sides of buildings and breaking glass. Some of the townspeople, watching from their windows, were forced to scatter. Later, Butler would wonder about those wild shots. would come to the conclusion that faced with imminent death at the hands of men like the Masterson brothers and Neil Brown, even the most professional of men could panic. Ruger's men fell one by one. Butler, the Mastersons, and Neil Brown continuing to waste little or no lead. Finally, Ruger himself was struck by several shots. They'd argue later over whose, and joined his men on the ground. The gunfire stopped. The smoke floated up and away, turning into tendrils as it drifted higher and higher. "Where the hell is Peacock?" Neil Brown demanded. Jim Masterson's partner was nowhere to be found. Chapter 57. On the day he was to leave town, Butler stopped in at Hank's Cafe for breakfast. Several days had passed since the shooting. Ruger and his men had been killed, Updegraff wounded. Both he and Peacock gone. No one knew where or heard from them again. The mayor had tried to have Bat and Jim Masterson arrested, but since Singer had not witnessed any wrongdoing, he did not make any arrests. Hank prepared a steak-and-egg breakfast for Butler and sat with him while he ate it. "So, you checked out of your hotel?" Hank asked. Butler nodded. "Time for me to move on. I'll bet the Mastersons were grateful for your help. They probably would have done just as well without me. Did they ever find out who sent that telegram to Bat Masterson in Tombstone?" "No," Butler said. Neil Brown had agreed to keep his mouth shut. It would go down in history as an anonymous telegram. "So, where are you headed?" "West. The next place. I'll probably make Tombstone, Denver, some other places along the way, and end up in San Francisco. What about you?" "What about me?" "You gonna stay here?" "Probably." "Wait for someone else to recognize you?" "Might not happen." "I hope it doesn't." Next to Butler's plate was the copy of the Dodge City Times, containing the story of the shooting. The Battle of the Plaza, M.J. Healy had called it. Butler didn't know where the plaza was, but it was as good a name as any for her big story. He'd told her everything he knew, in return for one thing. She left his name out. As far as anyone who read the story knew, it was Bat and Jim Masterson, along with Neil Brown. "What are the Mastersons going to do?" Hank asked. "Bat's already gone," Butler said. "Jim's going to sell, and he and Neil Brown will leave." "This town might actually end up being boring," Hank said. "That would be a switch." After breakfast, Hank walked Butler to the door. "So, everybody's satisfied," the cook said. "The mayor will be happy once Jim Masterson leaves. Dog Kelly will run his saloon, maybe run for office again next time." "I'd vote for him," Hank said, "if I was a voter." "So, you'll be happy here?" Butler asked. "For now." The two men shook hands, and Butler started to leave. "Wait." "What is it?" "You kept that bounty hunter away from me, Butler," Hank said. "I owe you for that." "You don't owe me anything, Hank. It's Henry," the man said. "Henry Plummer." "Henry Plummer?" Plummer waited to see if it would sink in. "Didn't I read something about Montana?" "Bannock," Plummer said, "and Virginia City." "And you were supposed to have been hanged in 63? 4, Plummer said. "A lot of years ago." "Where have you been all this time?" Moving, Plummer said. Job to job, name to name, until I got here. Well, Butler said, everybody deserves a second chance, Henry. Your secret is safe with me. I know it, Plummer said. Take care your own secrets don't catch up with you. They always do, Butler said, but I've learned to survive. I've been doing that for years, Henry Plummer said. Take my advice, Butler. Learn how to live.
The end. You've been listening to The Gamblers, Butler's Wager, by Robert J. Randisi, narrated by Jack Garrett. If you've enjoyed this book and this performance, Recorded Books recommends Captain's Rangers by Elmer Kelton, narrated by Kevin Orton. In 1875, nearly 40 years after the Mexican War, Mexicans and Texans are still spilling blood over ownership of the Nueces Strip, a hot, dry stretch of coastal prairie that bushwhackers and horse thieves have turned into a lawless hell. Captain L.H. McNelly, a complex and determined Confederate veteran, is brought into the Nueces Strip for one purpose: to keep the peace. His measures are harsh and controversial, but McNelly wasn't sent in to be popular. In this boiler pot of killing and racial hatred, can any man bring any lasting peace? You'll find a wide selection of titles in the Recorded Books catalog, including bestsellers, mysteries, classics, histories, and more. Call us toll-free or log on to www.recordedbooks.com to learn about our latest releases and special offers, order another recorded book, or to read author interviews and narrator profiles. Don't forget to ask about easy 30-day rentals by mail. And thank you for being a Recorded Books reader.